Hello and welcome to the show. Now, a recent addition to Forza Motorsport is actually a rather interesting car. While, there were all sorts of motorsport vehicles, this is the Ginetta, the G55, a GT4 car, is one of the vehicles actually I've been most interested to see add into the game. Things like this, things like the MX-5 Cup car, in fact. Vehicles that I feel like we need more of in Forza Motorsport. So it was very, very cool to see it introduced, which gave us a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of an idea. We set out to build our own GT4 car, seeing as we only really have this one as a proper full one. So that's what we went to do, using the Ginetta as a rough start point. Now, we did do a little bit of bop, if you like, some balance of power to these. We kind of built them using the same rough weight requirements, so it couldn't be lighter than the Ginetta, although that was very, very difficult to do. Similar sized tyres, similar sort of PI and everything. And then we would put the field of cars together. Now, of course, we could have lots of freedom in doing this, as we went to Kyalami for our first race. I was driving a Lexus with the RCF Track Edition going around here, but you could build what you like. We tried to stick with relatively modern cars. You could go crazy. There was an Audi RS4, for example, in here. Rear-wheel drive, swap the all-wheel drive cars, of course, make them all rear-wheel drive. It opened up a whole wide range of possibilities, and yeah, it was a really interesting sort of challenge to build the vehicles. Now, the grids were randomised. We had a nice spot at Kyalami here. It was, well, I say nice spot, relatively nice spot here on the grid, trying to follow through the sort of first few sections. We got a clean getaway, kept my nose out of trouble on the most part. My Lexus was one of the heaviest cars here. It did have a lot of power. It was fairly fast down the straight. In fact, it had some of the biggest tyres here. They had to be up as it was quite slow to start with. It wasn't the easiest of cars to drive around this Kyalami circuit. Now, the Ginetta, the base vehicle, if you like, was kind of as we have seen before. We've done these kind of challenges. We've tried to build vehicles to a real-life motorsport spec, and often what happens is the real-life car that we have, in this case the G55, is very, very grippy, which was the case here. There are a couple of cars that were quite similar in terms of grip, things like the Evora, for example, but this thing was mighty grippy. But the flip side is it just did not have the straight line speed of much. And if it started down the order, which it did here at Kyalami, it's a bit of a difficult one, because it would be quick in the corners, and you can see up ahead is madness. There's a Lincoln Co., a Cadillac, and a BMW 3 wide on the exit, and if the Ginetta can carry speed through the corners, well, it can't, because there's 3 cars in front of it, there's a bunch of cars in front of it, then it loses out down the straight. So the Ginetta was having a tough time in this one, trying to get through, although sometimes it did sort of work for it as well. Everyone else stacks up. The Ginetta has got a huge amount of grip. It can get away, although this time it's tried an ambitious move and got itself a little bit stuck out wide, this time battling with a BRZ as a 4C, got itself in trouble. Final corner, the Ginetta can have a go up the inside. It's all got very, very busy with the Ginetta managing to sneak its way past as the pack would go through up ahead. TT trying to now pass that Subaru, can't quite do it. BMW's got to run down towards the first corner. As you said, everything, I think, every car was faster than the Ginetta down the straight, but the BMW couldn't outbrake that the full-on proper race car. As much as we tried to build these to the spec of the Ginetta, it's tough to get the custom cars light enough. At the front of the field, this was the battle for the lead. In fact, I think these were certainly on the front, or towards the front. The Evora was leading the way from an Audi S3. An M3 had found itself in third. And I mean, this was, I say, a little bit of the reverse battle that we were seeing going on. The Evora had the grip in the corners. The Audi had the straight line speed. Not crazy differences between the pair of them, but a little bit. The Evora was a very strong car. Actually, the Evora had to have a little bit of a nerf going into this. They got a couple of ballast sort of things added on to it after some initial testing. But the Lotus was, as you would expect, it was a very, very good vehicle for this choice, and it was leading the way. But the Audi was always there. It was always putting pressure on. Speaking of Audis, I mean, Honestly, I should have maybe gone for an estate car. It's unlike me not to when there was an... To be fair, I didn't think the RS4 would work, so I never bothered trying to build one. Turns out, actually, it was not too bad at the front. You could see the Evora actually coming under threat from the RS3 down towards turn 1. The RS4 back here, yep, that was actually proving to be relatively competitive in this field. Having a go at getting past the Subaru down towards the first corner. The Audi to the inside would manage to just about make the pass stick. Subaru desperately tried to cling on around that wide line. Couldn't quite make that one work. Now, I will say, all the vehicles, pretty sure all the vehicles here were running Forza Aero. Forza replays don't show that for some reason. So it only shows it on the replay owner's car, if you like, the host car. So yeah, it shows it on my Lexus. Everybody was having Forza Aero, of course. You need the downforce. If you're going to be competing with these cars are all up in S-Class. I found myself in a bit of a tussle here. While you can see the Evora leads from the RS3, BMW in third, then it was the RS4 and Subaru. Then there was a Toyota. Then I found myself behind. Now, the Toyota was very different to my Lexus. My Lexus had a lot of straight line speed, and it wasn't brilliant in the corners. It struggled a little bit on traction. The Supra was very, very good in the corners and had absolutely zero straight line speed. I was looking, it did miss a shift down the straight, I believe, on that particular lap, so I suddenly closed up. But it then started to cause trouble, really. I was struggling to find a way past the Toyota because basically it would just get far enough away through the corners, and then I'd reel it in down the straights, and then I'd get stuck, and then we were sort of dealing with an Alpine and a Camaro and an MG, and a Lincoln Co was coming to join. Through the corners I had to deal with them, and it was all very messy. Essentially, we just had a big train of cars. Through a couple of sections, if I got things right, the Lexus could be quick in the corners. I struggled to be consistent with it. You can just about see the Ginetta in the background, actually, just behind this big train of cars going on. Yeah, I struggled to be consistent with the Lexus at times, as it is one of the heaviest cars in this field. As we came up the hill, this is the section where it would be quite good. It had got the power, I just couldn't get close enough. The Alpine there battling away with the Camaro, that looking around the outside. The Chevy with perhaps a little bit more speed than the French machine. Back at the front, it was Dangerman's Lotus continued to lead in this one. The M3 had gradually caught the top two, although that was more to do with their fighting. Pretty much, once you start battling, you're going to lose a heap of time. You're having to try and defend, you're having to try and attack, you're taking different lines, and sure enough, you are going to lose a fair chunk of time driving like that, as me and the Supra were finding out in this one. Yeah, you do lose a bunch of time. The Evora was ran a little bit wide, and that's all it takes. Like, you know, the leader was under immense pressure all the way through this. I think it was Stevie driving the RS3 in this one, and he's putting huge amounts of pressure on. So you're going to potentially make those little more mistakes. You're trying to get the absolute maximum out of the Lotus, so it does mean at times running a little bit wide. But again, much like I was finding in my battles against the Supra, the Audi was having a difficult time finding a way past. The Lotus was always just about far enough out of range. The BMW also, you could see how hard everyone was pushing it in this group. BMW also did a similar thing, just ran a little bit wide, clipped a wheel on the grass, got away without any major time loss through all of that. Kyalami was also not the easiest of tracks to overtake on. I like it, great fun track to go drive around, but it is a tough place to get past. As I continued to find out, as we headed towards the final lap of the race, I was still unable to find my way past the Supra. I had a big go into turn at number 1. I knew this was my best opportunity to get past, and I just couldn't stop it in time. The Lexus was quite good under brakes, all things considered, but that was asking a bit too much of it. I knew I had to go. Turn 1 had been the best opportunity, the closest I was going to get. If I could have got past at turn 1, I think I could have held it for the rest of the lap against the Toyota, but I couldn't. It was worth a try, but it just did not work out in the end. And at the front, it was going to be victory in the first race for the Lotus. Dangerman done a great job of holding off the pressure from that Audi. The Evora would take victory from the RS3. I believe it was Liam driving the BMW to come home in third. The Ginetta, well, that had kind of found itself stuck in the train of cars. It worked its way up into, this is around 10th, 11th place, trying to find a way past the Lincoln Co. Another unusual choice. That was what's great about this, being able to build our own GT4 cars. We had a huge selection, and some that you wouldn't necessarily normally see in these races. Things like the Lincoln Co, things like the MG, for example, were even being relatively competitive. Yeah, the Ginetta, Probably wasn't the best of tracks for the Ginetta. It's difficult to pass. It lacked a little bit of straight line speed and a terrible spot on the grid. Certainly didn't help it. Gliska was looking everywhere for a way past as they headed towards the final corner. The Lincoln Co. Was doing just enough to hold it off. The Subaru just beat the RS4 across the line, and I just held off from the Camaro while battling away with the Supra. It was manic. Great fun first race. Now, second race, we would head to Indy, the Indianapolis GP circuit. Don't often go around this track particularly. The RS3 found itself starting up towards the front, so random grids for this one. So I found myself way down at the back for the Indy round, and it would be the Subaru and the Audi that were leading the way. The Ginetta had a good spot on the grid for this one. It's right there in the mix. The Camaro was out a little bit wide. There's a little bit of a slide through there. It does get a little bit busy through the back chicane. The Ginetta opted for the safer, probably, route at that point of let's not have a big accident. And you can see the struggles of that Ginetta as soon as we got down the straight. Camaro pretty fast down here. That would have a go to the inside of the Subaru. The Lotus with a big dive. A good pass from the Lotus initially, although if you're on such a tight line, you're going to struggle to maintain the speed. The Ginetta gets it back, and of course the Ginetta's really, really quick now through this section. The Ginetta is looking every which way, and sure enough, there is a small gap. If there is a small gap, that Ginetta is going to find a way past. It's got that much grip in this particular battle, but then it loses out. The next section, we'll say the next straight, Camaro pulls away. Ginetta's going to fire it to the inside, and we'll get the car stopped in time. The Camaro's out a little bit wide, and the Alfa Romeo is going to follow through and make up that position as well. The Evora is keen to try and make some gains early on. That's being followed by an Audi TT, as there's some sliding out of the final corner. It would be the Lotus that would get alongside and past the Camaro. The TT opting to follow the Lotus. The Chevy, though, with a lot of straight line speed. Alfa Romeo, unsurprisingly, struggling a little bit with the top end. The smaller and lighter cars, generally in this, of course, having less power, would struggle a bit more with a lack of straight line speed. The Camaro just had a little bit of an unlucky section, got caught out wide by the Ginetta and just got dumped down the order. My Lexus, as I said, I started down towards the back of the field, and it was a slow progress early on. We were starting to. I actually think this track suited my car relatively well. We just struggled to make progress early on. We would get alongside the Alfa Romeo that had a little mistake in turn one at some point and fell back. Ewan's BMW went for an adventure. Wouldn't be the first and wouldn't be the last to go off at that particular corner. But yeah, the Lexus was slowly starting to make its way forward. Now, up at the front, the Audi was leading the way, but it was coming under increasing pressure. This time it was the Lotus having a look, but it was the Audi TT that was very fast here. Driven by Brazen, it was putting a huge amount of pressure on the top few. It'd be 3 wide down towards the first corner. You can see the Lotus struggling a little bit. There's a little bit of pinball between the two Audis, but they all get away with it. Yeah, I mean, sort of straight line speed-wise, there wasn't crazy differences between these vehicles. The balance of power we got kind of going on wasn't too bad, really. The TT was a little faster than the Evora, nothing ridiculous. The RS3 was a little bit faster, but yeah, nothing too crazy. Once I'd been released from the battles, released from the troubles, I say relatively quickly, we caught up to the next pack of cars that were having their own big squabble, and we were back to going 3 wide in places where 3 wide was a bit of an iffy idea. I had speed at this moment, but where the hell do you go? Lincoln Co. Cadillac and A110 are having their own battle, and they're going to go 3 wide onto the banking. Now, my Lexus was one of the fastest cars down the straights. I don't know if it was the very fastest, but it was certainly up there in terms of straight line speed, which helps here at Indy. We would outrun the A110, and then we'd be on the inside against the Cadillac, trying to have a go, find a way past. As I said, there was a lot of, you would find yourself fighting with a lot of different cars, often sort of a little bit determined how the opening that way you were on the grid, as everything could certainly put up a fight against everything through here as we round these first couple of corners. The Alpine is trying to fight back, but of course this is a difficult spot for the A110 to do much, especially against 2 of the faster cars. I think the Cadillac and my Lexus were some of the faster cars down the straights. The poor A110 gets stuck through the corners because we're fighting, and then gets lost down the straights. We were back to the inside and find our way past the big Cadillac into the twisty sections. Just do enough with the Lexus to move up. My goal was to now try and run away from this squabble and see if I could join in the next one. If you could break free of a battle and run in clean air for a little bit, it was wonderful, but you did often just sort of get sucked into the battles. The Ginetta remained towards the front here. It wasn't as fast as the top three. You can see those vanishing off into the distance a little bit. This was a track the Ginetta was likely to be struggle a little bit more around, shall we say. But it was again putting up a strong fight. And honestly, time trial wise, the Ginetta might be relatively competitive. It probably would be quite fast amongst these vehicles in terms of a sheer hot lap, but it was finding the traffic was difficult to deal with, because every time it would find a way, in this case, it was battling with a Camaro and Supra, would find a way to join in the battle, and then it'd get down a straight, and then it would lose out, and then it'd have to be slow through a corner because it's stuck behind them. Now, bear in mind how slow that Supra was compared to my Lexus in a straight line, and the Supra was quicker than the Ginetta. That was the struggles. That was the struggles that were going on with the actual GT4 car, but then it's immense in the turn, absolutely immense in the turns. It quite easily gets back past the Camaro and Supra as we go through that section, and Ginetta would go off chasing after the BMW. Now, my Lexus, again, once freed of some of the battles, was relatively fast. Ninetales in the Camaro slightly missed a braking point, as what I said, more cars had issues at that section. So I dealt with the Camaro, I got past the Camaro with relative ease. It's a really easy mistake to make. So yeah, I think Nigel missed the brake, so opted to go on the grass to avoid having a big accident. Impega put a wheel on the grass in that Audi on the outside of the corner, almost went off the circuit. I was going to make the most of the opportunities with the Lexus here and fire it to the inside of the RS4. That would move me up a position briefly, because the Audi would go for the cutback, looking for a way back past. I, funnily enough, found myself looking at the back of a Supra. Well, almost. It was a good move by the Audi to hold on to that position, and I wanted to go around the outside heading onto the banking. I mean, I knew my car, I knew we were coming onto a straight, and I knew this is where the Lexus was going to be very, very powerful. We knew it was going to be strong. I sat in the slipstream. Well, I say in the slipstream, we were pretty much pushing the RS4 all the way down the straight, and we would go for a big dive into turn one, and that would be the move, and that would be the moment we would make the pass stick on the RS4. The brakes were actually surprisingly good on the Lexus. The Supra would then run very wide through the next couple of corners, which actually caused me a little bit of a problem. Now, we were trying to get settled. We end up all a little bit out of sorts. Impega would then have a very good opportunity with the RS4 to fire back through. So all my hard work in going around, getting past the RS4, gets a little bit undone as the Supra kind of gets in the way. We get stuck in a really awkward place through here, frantically trying to find a way to almost get past the Supra, but that Toyota is really good in the twisty stuff. So we have a go to the inside on the next corner, can't make it stick, a really tight line, get a big slide. The Lincoln Co. pounces, which was very frustrating, and that would then get past me, and then is set up for getting past the Supra. The bloody Toyota causing grief no end in this one, and we would though be able to shove the nose up the inside into the next corner, and well, do a similar move around the outside on the Supra that Impega had done on us to hold us. And I knew once we got onto the straight, that would be enough. That would be enough for us to outrun that Toyota. We'd seen it struggle at Kyalami. Now, while we had been having our own fantastic little battle further back up at the front, it was once again Audi versus Evora, although we should add a caveat. Brazen was leading with the TT, actually had quite a comfortable lead when I can't remember, a controller issue, had to go. So the TT had a big lead, and technical difficulties, shall we say, dropped it back. Dangerband absolutely sent the Evora. On the final lap of the race, I think you have to do it. Had an opportunity, sent it to the inside, couldn't stop it in time, and put a wheel on the grass. So it would be Stevie with the RS3 that would go on to claim victory in race 2, although the TT was the fastest car. Not by a huge margin, but the TT was the fastest car there. Unfortunate for Brazen. The Ginetta, once free of traffic, was rapid. Caught up to what was now the battle for third place against the M3, and was coming up against a similar sort of problem. BMW would just outrun it every time we got to a straight, and exactly the same manoeuvre was attempted as the Evora tried. A big dive to the inside. This one is a little bit more off the circuit for the Ginetta. Again, it's the last lap of the race. It's your last chance to go for a pass. I would probably do the same in that one. The Ginetta, you know it's got good brakes, you know it's got good grip. You send it to the inside, you try. At the end of the day, the worst thing that happens is, well, it still ends up in fourth. off. So, respect the effort, would have done the same, but it just couldn't quite hold on. For our third and final race, we would head to Silverstone. I had a nice spot on the grid here with my Lexus. The MG led the way from the Lincoln Co. I was side by side again with a big caddy. I mean, me and the Cadillac were probably some of the more similar cars in this one. We all fight our way through this. There's a little bit of paint swapping, a little bit of contact, nothing too crazy through this first section. I get myself up into third. There's a few cars clobbering. The big sausage curbs are sketchy as anything around here. The Cadillac is a little bit unsettled on a curve. We saw a couple of cars. The opening lap, everything's very, very hectic around here. There's a little bit of fanning out. The curbs at Silverstone are quite nasty, even for these sort of our custom-made race cars. The curbs could be a little bit nasty around here. But it was, again, a relatively clean start for everybody. The top three, actually, we were managing to make a little bit of a break. The MG leading the way, but we were all able to... And we were only talking a smidge. The Ginetta, once again, was a little bit further down in the pack. Here at Silverstone, it was, well, a monster in the corners. It's a great pass to get around the RS3. Bear in mind, the RS3 that had been right at the front in the previous two races through Maggers and Beckett's, a very difficult section of corners to overtake. The Ginetta finds a way past, and then it goes on a straight, and then the Audi is quicker. And then the Audi would go back past it. The Ginetta, though, once again, really good on the brakes. It's a big lunge. It's a big lunge from a long way back, but the Ginetta has just got that much better brakes. So as much as our pretend GT4 cars are trying to replicate the real thing, even the quick ones can't quite do what the Ginetta can in some ways. Their lap times can, but their lap times have to be gained in a slightly different way. I mean, as we come around the final corner here, the Supra was having a battle with an RS4. Now that is a big block of cars in the way. That is a big lot of metal to try and find a way past. But never mind, the Ginetta has a lot of grip, and it's 3 wide with that all the way around the outside of the Audi, inside for the next corner. It's a brilliant pass right there to get the pair of them in one section. But of course, as much as the Ginetta has got through, it is about to go onto a straight, although helped by the fact that the Audi was still tangling. I think the Audi got a little bit sideways with a tiny bit of contact from the Supra. And that is one thing that can help the handling car, is that if there is a lot of traffic, they can sort of trip over each other, even with the RS4 being a little bit further back. Next straight, here it comes. It's to the inside. Sensible place to try a manoeuvre. The Ginetta is likely to have the grip to make that stick. It'll hold it around the outside for the first part. You're on the inside through the next corner, and the Ginetta can accelerate away, and it can get on its power sooner than the RS4. It's always going to be vulnerable down the long straights. This time, though, able to just about get itself out of range, and certainly be ready to defend as we head towards the old turn 1. The RS4 can draw alongside, but it's a long way around the outside of a grippy car, and it can't quite pass. And Maggers and Beckett's is where that Ginetta can really fly. The Audi thinks better of trying to make it too wide through this section, and you'll be able to see how much the G55 can pull on the RS4 just through this little section alone. The fast Maggers and Beckett's is brilliant in the super grippy cars, and then you just hope you're far enough away. I was having a good race, actually, with my Lexus in this one. We were kind of going with the leaders, although I was starting to have problems. First problem, being a Cadillac, was behind me. I was really struggling with traction. So in terms of the balance of power, as I said at the start, the tyre widths for the vehicles were along the lines of the Ginettas. The Ginetta's tyres were upgraded a little bit because the tyre widths they actually use are very weird, and we couldn't do them. We wouldn't be able to copy them with modern vehicles. My Lexus here, for the balance of power, actually had the biggest tyres, I think, of anything. So me and possibly the LC500 had very big tyres. Still had no traction. Well, not no traction, but I was really struggling putting the power down in the Lexus compared to some of the cars around me. So yeah, that was an entertaining experience. So while for a brief moment I was looking okay, once I started having Cadillac for company, I started to really struggle with my rear tyres, and the Lincoln Co would gradually drive away. Now, the Evora, let's not forget here, the Evora, the RS3 and the M3 had all been very fast. In fact, had been the podium cars, if you like, from the first two races. Now, they started further down the order here at Silverstone, and they struggled to make crazy progress through the field, which I think is a good sign for how these vehicles sort of worked out, the balancing for these vehicles. If you could get in clean air, you could run fast. There certainly were some cars that were a bit faster than others, but generally, sort of looking back and looking through, relatively pleased with how everything worked out. Unfortunately for the poor Subaru here, the Lotus tried its best to get alongside. It just kind of ran out a little bit of room, and the Subaru got a little bit of a tag through there. The Evora ended up losing out to the RS3 through all of that. Up at the front, the MG would be leading the way. As I said, interesting, unusual cars. Were certainly doing well. They got themselves into some clean air. The MG leading the way from the Lincoln Co, and they did start to pull away. After I kept up with them for a couple of laps, and then I struggled, and then I got stuck in a fight with a Cadillac, and then really lost a bunch of time. But yeah, up at the front, it would be the MG and the Lincoln Co. Shadow driving the MG, Longbow driving the Lincoln Co, and I think it was the Lincoln Co. was pretty quick down the straight. It could get sort of close to the MG, but it never ever got close enough to be looking for an overtake, essentially. It always kind of stayed just about behind. The Ginetta also had a lower spot on the grid. It was making its way forward once again here. Good move up the inside of the BMW to take away another position. Yeah, it was gradually making its way up towards. It's just about inside the top 10. Going on here, and it was the same as we had seen in all the previous races. Immense grip. I mean, it gets out-dragged down towards turn 1 by the Z4. The Z4, not a crazy fast car in a straight line, although the Z4 couldn't quite hold it through turn 1 at the end of the day. Yeah, it was a difficult. It's always difficult. The Alfa Romeo having a big look and can't quite do it. Conks the curb. Yeah, it was. Even though the Ginetta did struggle with its straight line deficiency, it was still able to make its way up through the pack. Now, I was starting to cause problems. I was sat in third with the Lexus, and I was a difficult car to pass. I had very, very good straight line speed. Which made my car awkward to get past because I was slowing everyone down in the corners. And while we were battling, I was battling the Cadillac, and it wasn't long before the Alpine and before Brazen's TT would come to join in this little group. And we thought we let the front cars get away. Thankfully, the Ginetta's fight through the pack had kind of kept the rest of the pack away, so this remained the battle for 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. With the rest not quite having enough time to really join in. The Alpine, of course... So, I mean, in this battle, the Alpine was the best in the corners, but was beaten by everything in a straight. The TT was better in the corners than me and the Cadillac, but was beaten in the straight by me and the Cadillac. The Cadillac was probably a bit better driven than me, to be honest. I think car-wise, it was fairly similar between the pair of them. If anything, maybe my Lexus a little tiny bit faster down the straights, but... not quite. I think not quite as good in the corners. I think more I just wasn't as good as a zombie that was driving the Cadillac, if I'm being perfectly honest there. Up at the front, things remained as they had been for the for the whole race. Here, the MG would continue to lead. Every so often, Longbow would sort of close a little bit and then couldn't really do anything. Never got close enough to really find a way past. But it was cool to see some very, very different cars here at Silverstone would go on to take victory. Yeah, the MG would take first ahead of that Lincoln Co. On the final lap, I was still coming under pressure with the Lexus, doing everything I could to try and fend off from the cars behind, and I knew I was going to be vulnerable at the end of the straight. The Cadillac was fast. I didn't get Magnussen Beckett's quite right. I clonked the curb too hard, so I knew it was going to be dangerous down here. The Cadillac pulled alongside to try and get a move, but I made sure I could get across to defend the inside. I knew what I had to do up here. Cadillac were looking for a way past. The Lexus were pretty good under brakes, so as he head at the end of the straight, I would keep the lead. Now, the Brazen's Audi was there having a look. Gets a little bit on the grass, gets a little bit sideways. The Alpine is right there once more. I know I've got to defend down here. We know there's going to be potentially trouble through here. The Cadillac tries, it can't quite make it work around the outside. A little bit slow mid-corner. The Alpine gets a brave move around the outside. Unfortunately for the poor Alpine, the Cadillac hit the curb and got very sideways, clonked into it. We would hold on to third. Brazen would end up fourth. In all of that. Sadly, as I cross the line, that cuts the replay off. It was a hectic finish to the race. In the end, the Ginetta gained a couple of places and ended up in 5th, I think it was, from the spin with the Cadillac and the Alpine. It was interesting, I gotta say, building these cars. It was very good fun building our custom GT4 cars. And we actually had some really good racing, we had some really interesting results, and the sort of vague balancing that we did. So we built to the rough specs, did a few test races, some time trials, and kind of added ballast or added tyre widths and gave cars a little bit more power here and there. Made an interesting field of cars. As I said, some cars worked better than others. There were certainly some fast cars. The Cadillac, for example, had to be quite heavily, well, not heavily nerfed, but the Cadillac had some ballast added. The Evora had some ballast added. A few, bits and pieces here. The RCF, as much as I love it, wasn't very good. it just didn't quite. It's just too heavy. This car was over £3,000. The Ginetta's 2,300. I was running. In fact, I was running more power in this. It was over 500 and something. I was running more power in this than the GT3 car because it was that heavy to try and keep pace with the Ginetta. Little bit weird, not gonna lie. Little bit weird way around of doing things, but it was brilliant fun. I actually really enjoyed this. Really enjoyed these races. Really enjoyed building the cars to try and compete. And we made a funky, interesting grid. You know, there were some really genuinely interesting battles. Some unusual cars were working, being competitive. And the RS4 working in this was awesome to see. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed our little pretend GT4 race with a couple of very, very powerful cars. Yeah, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you all very much for watching. And until next time, goodbye.